Hello, National Government class. Hope you're having a good day. I'm recording this on Tuesday, the 24th, because my original video that I recorded about 3 days ago, for some reason, got basically deleted. So here we are. So I'm gonna begin the lecture here in chapter 12 on the presidency, and I'm going to be sending you the PowerPoint for that this morning, along with, provided that this gets uploaded quickly here, all of the videos for it. So if you have your PowerPoint on chapter 12, I'm going to shift over to slide number 6, and we're talking about the presidency and the changing conception of the presidency. And probably the biggest thing you need to understand is obviously the president and his office, or her office if a female gets elected, is the singular most important office in our country right now. It's obviously exacerbated with the coronavirus outbreak, but again, what we're going to understand here, at least in this first section we're talking about, is the conception of the modern presidency today is much larger and much grander than what the founders envisioned. And a lot of this has to do with intentional attempts by a couple of key progressive leaders that shifted the presidency towards, again, more ascendancy. One of the things you got to remember is, in our system of government, we have three co-equal branches of government. You've got the legislative branch in Article 1, you've got the executive branch in Article 2, and then you've got the judicial branch in Article 3. And the way our founders set it up is all three of them are at the same level. Okay, not one branch is not supposed to ascend higher than the others. They are co-equal, so they're all at the same level. That's how the founders set it up. Beginning in the 20th century, and again, I'm going to talk about this in a moment, the progressives began to see the presidency, the Article 2 executive office, as basically a section of the government that needed to be elevated to get things done quickly, to get things done efficiently, to bypass the checks and balances in our system of government, and to make it basically able to act more quickly than how the founders envisioned. So we're going to talk about that in this class. So if you go to slide number 2, you can see there it's talking about Andrew Jackson. Andrew Jackson is probably the first president that tried to assert a broad claim to national policy. He called himself the People's Tribune. And again, in his presidency, he tried to basically elevate the office of the presidency. But after he left office, his successors did not attempt to do that. And there was a number of reasons why. First of which is America was largely sectional in nature prior to the Civil War. Again, I think I've talked about this in class, but most Americans, if you would have interviewed them in the 1850s, would you ask, if you ask them, are you an American? I mean, they might say yes, but probably more likely they would say, no, I'm a Michigander if they're from Michigan, or I'm a Tennessean if I'm from Tennessee. In other words, they tended to look at themselves as connected to their state or even their region. I'm a Southerner or I'm a Northerner. Okay, so that's one reason why the office of the presidency didn't encompass all of the nation as an umbrella, because again, the American people did not look at America the way we do today. Again, the common refrain, and you see this in the Olympics, USA, USA, those chants and things like that. This idea that we've got a collective understanding of the country, that wasn't there in prior to the Civil War. Another reason why the office of the presidency was not able to basically ascend higher than the other branches is that Congress tended to guard its power very, very jealously. And Congress was very quick to basically assert its own rights. So if a president began to, encroach upon the legislature in some way, shape, or form, there will be all kinds of pushback. In fact, I put this in the slide, in slide number 7. Congress paid no more attention to presidential pronouncements than editorial stands of newspaper articles. In other words, think of it this way: the first inaugural, or not the inaugural address, but the first presidential report to Congress, or the State of the Union speech, Washington made it to Congress directly, and he was so uncomfortable with the whole experience that basically the next 7 years of his presidency, he basically wrote down his State of the Union, and it was read by somebody else to Congress. In fact, that's exactly how presidential addresses, State of the Unions, were delivered to Congress for the next 100+ years. It was not until, I believe it was Woodrow Wilson's presidency, where he began to address Congress directly in the State of the Union. In other words, the presidential office was a much smaller office, okay, at that time. If you move forward to slide number 8, you can see basically the general conception of the presidency from the founding till about the early 20th century was what was called the Whig theory of the presidency. And basically the idea is this, is the presidency is a legal office, not a political office. What I mean by legal is a president can only do what the Constitution says he can do. Beyond that, the president and the president's office does not extend beyond that. In fact, as your slide reads, it's the Whig theory of the presidency. It's a weak presidency. A president is limited or constrained in his office and is empowered to act only within the confines of expressly granted constitutional authority. Okay, so we're talking about enumerated powers, the clearly defined powers there in Article 2. That's all that presidents could do. All right, so they're very, very limited in that way. And again, they saw themselves. So by contrast, when you're talking about a political office, if the presidency was tied to a political office or was considered a political office, the idea there is that the president would, the president's authority, the president's stature, the office of the presidency would be connected to presidential approval or popularity or how much political clout that president had. Okay, and again, we're going to talk about that in the next lecture. And you can see another example of the Whig theory. President Buchanan, who was a Whig, said, "My duty is to execute the laws and not by my individual opinions." Okay, are presidents opinionated today? You know, obviously President Trump obviously is, but that the same was true for President Obama and going on back. Okay, presidents are said today to have a congressional agenda, again, which is very, very modern, because again, if you think it through, the presidency has nothing to do with legislation, or shouldn't, because Article 1, Section 1 of the Constitution says all legislative authorities herein granted to the Congress. Okay, so in other words, the Whig theory was a much constrained view of the presidency. In other words, let me say it this way, if George Washington were alive today and he would see President Obama in action or President Trump in action, he would be just flabbergasted. Like, this is not what we envisioned for the president. The president is not supposed to be that much in charge of everything, or at least dominating the politics in the way that it was when I was president. So anyway, I'm going to upload this and hopefully I can get this to you shortly, and I'll talk to you soon. Take care.